Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the 3-part series of Herbs for Winter Wellness. This part 3, I'm going to be talking about fevers and specifically the herbs that we can use to help us get through a fever, as well as what is the actual mechanism and why is it that our body gives us a fever anyway when we get sick. So, hi, my name's Allison from The Well Cultivated Life, and thanks for joining me here. I'm an herbalist and educator, and sometimes I'm a biologist. And if you saw part 1 and part 2 of this, you'll know that I am just really fascinated with the way that the body systems work to keep us healthy, and also the way that we can use herbs in conjunction with our body's natural processes to keep us healthy. So, having a fever is not fun. In part 1, we learned about how the immune system works and how we need these different types of cells to go around and take care of invaders. We also fell in love with our mucus a little bit and learned how important that was. And then in part 2, I talked about coughs and the different types of coughs that we have and herbs that can help us, as well as some of the reasons why you might not want to just run out and take an over-the-counter cough medication, specifically cough suppressants. So let's talk a little bit about fevers. This is another mechanism that our body uses along with mucus and coughs to help us combat illness. And so, what is actually happening when we get a fever? The science behind it is quite an interesting strategy. And in a nutshell, what's happening is that we um, are creating an environment in our body that is unfriendly to these invading pathogens that are coming in by changing and creating a hot temperature. So, what's going on? In part 1, we talked about the immune system. What's going on is that as the macrophages, these little Pac-Man type organisms, are going around the bloodstream, they're gobbling up foreign particles and kind of monitoring what's going on. But when we get an infection of some sort, all of a sudden there's a lot more than they can just handle on their own. And so they're sending a message to our hypothalamus, which is our main master gland in our brain. And the hypothalamus initiates a sensation of feeling cold. So, not like having an illness cold, but temperature cold. And so the whole body's like, whoa, what's going on here? You're cold. We better raise the temperature. And so a lot of other things kick into gear when this happens that I'm not going to go into right now. But essentially, that is why our immune system responds with making us hot. Now, part of the basis behind this is that many viruses, including COVID, just don't like hot temperatures. They prefer a temperature more around 97 degrees Fahrenheit, which, apologies, I'm not sure exactly what that is Celsius. I don't know why the US can't use some other, the same thing as everybody else does. But anyway, so that is why we tend not to get colds or flus or other infections as much during the summer because they just don't survive as well. A lot of viruses have lipids in them, which is a type of a fat. And so it just sort of melts during the summer heat. So the thing is that, fevers are extremely uncomfortable, especially if we're starting to sweat. We're soaking our sheets, we got to change the bed and things like that. And so we really do kind of want to try to get some relief from it. Now, you got to recognize that sweating is one of the body's primary mechanisms for cooling the body. And so this is where the fever chill cycle comes in. The body raises the temperature, we get hot, the body's like, oh, wait, you're hot now, and kicks in some other mechanisms that cause you to sweat. And so there are ways that we can support our body in this natural process, because one of the things that happens is we tend to go to the over-the-counter medications like ibuprofen or acetaminophen when we get a fever to try to bring the fever down. But when we're interfering with this, if the fever hasn't run its course, so to speak, we're not allowing it to sort of create this environment that the pathogens don't like. And so we're not as effectively killing them off. So, what can we do to help our body? Now, obviously, a high temperature can be dangerous. If your body's getting up to 105 degrees, you're at risk of actually getting organ and tissue damage and so on. So you really do need to monitor your temperature when you get sick. Now, most of the research that I've read states that 102 degrees is a good, safe temperature for most people. Everyone's body is different. That helps to have this effect without having any probable risk towards any kind of damage or anything. Now, when my son was little, he was one of these fever kids. So he would always get a fever whenever he got sick. And he's 18 now, but he still gets fevers. But what would happen was, as a parent, it's like really scary when your child is sick because they're lethargic or they're kind of out of it, right? And so fortunately, I understood that the fever is a natural process, so we kind of let it run its course and again, monitor it well. And there would be times when he would get so hot that I wanted to actually give him some, you know, Tylenol or Advil or one of these types of medications just to give him a break because you can't really sleep, right? If you have a fever. So what I would do is try to give it to him and he'd be like, no, I don't want that. Get that stuff away from me. He just wouldn't take it. And I don't know if that was just his body's intuition saying no, or if he just tasted the taste of bubble gum or whatever it was that they used for that. But in this case, it worked out okay for him. Again, you've got to monitor temperature and make sure that you're not getting too high because we want these bodies' natural chill mechanism to kick in. And sometimes it doesn't. And that's the case when we need to do other things and get extra support. Now, another thing that happens when you get a fever is that you kind of lose your appetite. And there is the saying, feed a cold, starve a fever. And then there's a reason behind that. And part of it is that we don't want to be using all our energy digesting our food when we really need to conserve our energy so that the immune system can go out and do its work. So if you feel like resting, just rest. If you feel like you don't want to eat, that's okay. You don't need to worry about it as long as you're drinking enough fluids, of course. Now, during this series, we've talked about these different mechanisms that the body has, including mucus and coughs and now fevers. And I wanted to just share this quote with you because I think it really sums it up really well. Mucus and coughing and fevers. Oh my. But this is from Rosalie de la Forêt, who is one of my favorite herbalists. She is an herbalist in her own right and has published several awesome books, but she also is affiliated with learningherbs.com, which is a great site for beginning and even more advanced herbalists as well. And she says it so well. Unless symptoms are severe, we don't want to stop these important processes. We have these body processes for a reason. And so we want to let them run the course to the point where they are still safe. So before I get into sharing some herbs with you, I have to put up my usual disclaimer, which is that I am sharing the traditional uses of plants. It's provided as educational information. Always do your own research and work with a qualified health professional, especially if you are taking any kind of prescription medications, because many drugs can interact with herbs. And use extra caution if you are pregnant or nursing, because many herbs are contraindicated for use during pregnancy. And that is mostly because we just don't have the information, the studies on the herbs. And lastly, make sure you're monitoring a fever closely to make sure your body is maintaining a safe temperature. Of course, if you're getting hot and the fever isn't going down and it's been days and days, you need to seek additional help and you've got to know your body and how your body works. Again, I'm just giving you the information. It's up to you, make the decision. So what I want to do next is I want to share just one of my favorite herbal tea formulas that I like to use whenever I get a fever. And here it is, fever tea recipe. So what I'll put, my formula is elder, yarrow, peppermint or some other kind of mint, wintergreen, mugwort, lemon balm, and rose hips. And now I'm going to go through each one of those. Here's a quickie slide that shows all of those together. That's a beautiful combination, isn't it? And when we had in part 2, when I did the cough syrup, when you're deciding how to choose which herbs for a cough, we looked at the herbal energetics. In this case, we know what a fever is doing. It's a more specific type of situation. And so we're going to choose specific herbs for specific properties, or what's called herbal actions. And one of the actions that we want is called a diaphoretic. And a diaphoretic means that it helps your body sweat, cool. That's what a diaphoretic does. So in this formula, there are 3 diaphoretics. Well, kind of 3.5, but which are yarrow, mint, and elder. And I actually have these plants here on my table. I'm going to show them to you after I go through this real quick. So those 3 are going to help us with the cooling aspect of working with a fever. And we also need to relax. We need to be able to rest. And so I like to add mugwort and lemon balm to my fever tea as well. And lastly, I will add the wintergreen, which is an anodyne. That means it helps with pain. And rose hips, which is a nourishing, specifically for vitamin C, which we need when we are ill. So let me share these plants with you. I've got them right here. And the first one is the elder flower. Now, we're mostly familiar with elderberries and the elderberry syrups and things like that, which have become very popular. But elderflower is a, here, I'll hold it against my black shirt, is a, blooms in usually like the late spring, depending on where you live. I've seen it blooming in January or February in Florida. So it grows like an umbrella shaped white flower. And then you harvest that and just let it dry, because generally, you can use it in the summer for cooling as well as for a fever. And it's quite delicious in a tea. And the way that the herbs help to cool you down is there's a couple of different things that the herb is doing. It's circulating the blood towards the surface of your skin, opening the capillaries and allowing some of the heat to escape. And that's what the second plant is really, really good at, yarrow. So yarrow is a blood mover, which means it circulates the blood kind of where it needs to go. And it's well known for helping with wound healing, partly for that reason. It's like, well, do you need blood, or are we having too much blood, and so on. And its botanical name, I love the name of it, is Achillea millefolium, because legend has it that Achilles used this plant to put on his wound when he was shot with an arrow in that critical spot on his, it was on his heel, right? And it's also, the second part is millefolium, because this is what the foliage looks like. It's got, millefolium means 1,000 leaves, and it's got these little teeny multi-dissected foliage on here. And so it's almost feathery looking, and that is a unique distinguishing feature of Achillea millefolium, yarrow, which grows wild around North America. And a lot of the herbs that we have are brought over from Europe with the colonists, but yarrow is actually native, as is elder native. And our third diaphoretic is mint. I have apple mint in my yard, and so that's what I use. It's a much milder mint. Another option you could use would be peppermint, isn't the one that people usually use, but you could also use an essential oil. And in this case, you would just need to inhale it. You could do a steam if you were really kind of clogged up. But in this case, you would just take a smell of it, and that could help to open the pores and cool you down. Now, our second category is our nervines. The yarrow leaf. Look at this leaf. Yarrow leaf's trying to get in with the nervines. So we're starting with mugwort, and the fall has been kind of wacko, and I still have a mugwort blooming in near my house, and this is in flower, and this is the foliage of it, and it's in the Artemisia family, and so a lot of it is one of the distinguishing features is this white underside to the plant that is in a lot of the Artemisias have that silvery underside or a silvery sheen to the plants themselves. And so mugwort is something that I don't know where I got this from, but years ago I found the formula to put it in for like a fever or a cold. And so I started using it. And it wasn't until recently that I've really started to work with this plant a little bit more closely. And I found out that it's also very good for your digestion as a bitters. It's good for the liver, for all kinds of cleansing and so on. But in this case, we're using it because it's helpful for sleeping. And we know when we are sick, we really need to rest. Now, you might be more familiar with mugwort, something like this, as a smudge stick. It's used to smudge around and for both clearing, and also you might smudge before you go to sleep at night to help you have clearer dreams. Now, I think that part of that has to do with if you're having a more restful sleep, you're going to be able to dream better. And let's see here. Our second nervine is lemon balm. And now lemon balm is known as somewhat of an antiviral, but it's really more specific for like a herpes, cold sore type of virus. And but it's also a mild diaphoretic, so it's going to add a little bit to that. And it's also quite delicious. It's it's in the mint family, so it's going to have those sort of aromatic cooling type of properties, and it just really goes well in the tea. So far we have 5 things in our tea, and the ratio is pretty much up to you. You could put sort of a 1-to-1, one part of each into your tea. Next we have the rose hips, and these are some rose hips that I bought commercially, and these have been de-seeded. The seeds inside the rose hip can be really irritating because they have a hair on it, little hairs on them. So you want either a completely de-seeded or a whole rose hip. You do not want crushed up rose hips that still have the seeds inside of them. It doesn't bother everyone, but it could be irritating to some people. And if you're sick, that's the last thing you want, right? Getting irritated by the tea that's supposed to be helping you. So you can harvest wild roses. I have these little multiflora roses that grow near me, and I like to harvest them. Not only, like, you got to get a lot of these to be able to use for a tea, but I like them also for decoration. They're quite beautiful. Put it in a little herbal wreath or something like that. Now, the main reason why we're using the rose hip is because of the vitamin C content that it has. And vitamin C, we always hear, oh, take vitamin C if you get sick. But I decided to look into it a little bit more. And it turns out that vitamin C gets right in there with the immune system and has different functions for most of the main types of cells that are part of the immune system. It also helps with what I was talking about earlier, where virus, which is the way the viruses attack us. As they go through the cell wall, they commandeer our mitochondria, and they basically suck all the energy out of the cell. The cell dies, they replicate, and then they move on to the next cell. So by keeping the cells from the viruses from being able to get through the cell wall, this is one of the things that vitamin C helps with. So that's why part of the why it's so important. And also, we get really inflamed when we're sick. If there's a bunch of material being put into the lymph system, and we're getting the swollen glands and all of these things happening, vitamin C is an antioxidant, so it helps with inflammation. It can just help process some of those things going on. So the last one is, of course, the wintergreen, and I don't have wintergreen. That is generally harvested right around now, and so I will be heading out to do a wintergreen harvest sometime in the next couple of weeks. And wintergreen, again, is for pain relief, and that's because it has the same compound as aspirin is derived from. Aspirin's obviously, been purified and so on, but it does have a little bit of a relief from there. It's also in the mint family, so it has no, it's not in the mint family, but it has the mint scent to it, so that aromatic scent to it can be really helpful, again, for cooling. And that is our tea blend. And the last thing I wanted to show you is how I make my teas, because I've seen so many people when they first start getting into using blending their own teas and wanting to make their own teas, if in the old-fashioned teapot, if you were going to brew some tea, you basically just would put the tea leaves in the bottom and pour the hot water in. But so many people I see trying to use those little tea strainer things, or tea balls, I guess they are. And the problem with that is that the tea and the plants, they just don't have enough room for the water to get around it and soak it well enough to be extracting the good stuff out of the plant. So what I do is I brew my tea in a mason jar like this, or ball jar, or canning jar, whatever you want to call it. That gives plenty of room for the plant material to get stirred, get soaked through, and extract what I want. And I will let this tea sit overnight if I can. If I need it, I'll pour some off, and then I will just let it continue steeping overnight. And then when I'm ready to pour, I use a sieve like this, and I just put it on top of my cup, pour the tea through, and it strains out the material, and then I have a nice cup of tea. Cheers. Now, this is not a fever tea because I do not currently have a fever, but it's just a nice sipping tea with some mint and other things in it, roses and so on. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that that was helpful for you and that you were inspired to go out and get a few more herbs to put into your herbal pantry so you are ready to make a tea in case someone gets a fever. And so thank you so much for watching. Remember to always do your research, be aware of drug interactions and pre-existing conditions. Thank you for watching. You can follow me on social at Cultivate My Life, and be sure to subscribe and like this video so you can get notified of any other programs that I have coming up. Thanks again, everyone, for watching, and have a wonderful day.